Hello everyone. In a prior video entitled Enemies of the State 2 Insurance Fraud, I talked about some of the things that I've seen in a local hospital, and I don't think it's isolated to just that hospital, but situations where the DoD have the contractors in the hospital working ultimately for NSA. And while they're working in the hospital, they're using the same electronic equipment. And in the case that I've heard about and am connected with, that equipment is manufactured by a company called Tetra Systems. And it's the same electronics that's used out in the community to stalk, harass, assault, etc. And it's used on people in the hospital. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit today. And I want to bring out a case where it was used on my mom in the hospital in just recent times. Okay, so as I understand all of this to work, they have people that are working in the hospital and they run this type of equipment within that facility. And there are people out in the community stalking others, and it sounds like a lot of them. As you know, a lot of people being stalked in the community. And at times, they force them into the hospital for one reason or another. It may be for a psychiatric inpatient stay, and police may get involved in that. Or it may be some other situation where they're hospitalized. And once they're in the confines of the hospital, people within that facility take it over. And adjustments are made depending on what's happening to the person. Now, back in, around Thanksgiving time, there was significant violence carried out against me, and I'll talk about that a little later, probably in another video, but by those that are stalking me. And so that was kind of disturbing, and it really disturbed my Thanksgiving, and I think that was the intent. And then on December 1st, again, significant violence carried out against me, and I realized that I had to get out of there, and I wanted to find somewhere else to go, to get away from my home. It was just getting to be too much. And I found a place where I'm staying right now in Canada, in Quebec, in the town of Coaticook. And so I inquired of this place at that time, and things were so difficult at my house because of the harassment with this electronic equipment, the Tetra Systems equipment, which is right in my neighborhood, and I'm followed everywhere I go. So it goes with me. Things were getting so bad that I was considering skipping Christmas and just coming here. And when I say skipping Christmas with my family. I normally get together with my mom and my boys and others on Christmas. We exchange presents. It's a beautiful time. But things were getting so bad, I was considering just buying presents and leaving them and getting out of there, to kind of running for my life. So I inquired about this place up here where I am. And it looked like it was available, but within a day, someone else had already taken it. So I thought it all through, and I said, you know what? I'll try to hang in there through Christmas. And so I did. Had a nice Christmas with the family. And just prior to Christmas, I finalized the schedule to come here and stay. And I had scheduled to come here on, let me see, on I was supposed to arrive here on January 7th, and I made that confirmation, that reservation, just prior to Christmas. Now, as I pointed out in just a prior video, the psychology of my stalkers, they're incredibly fearful as it pertains to losing me. And it's as if they'd risk their life to prevent that. And they'll certainly risk an awful lot. And I would say up to and including putting their life in danger to try to keep me where I am, to try to prevent from losing me. And the idea of FBI coming to Canada and stalking me here, I think that was a difficult one for them to try to pull that off. And so I get through Christmas. I make the reservation to stay here for a month, starting on January 7th. And I got together with some targeted people at my home. They came right after Christmas, and it was planned. We had a beautiful get-together. That my friends that are targeted are all really wonderful people, and it's always a pleasure to get together with them. And it was a great way to kind of finish off the Christmas holiday, you know, around the decorations and all, and being with friends. So we had a very nice time, and just as that was wrapping up on December 30th, and they had come. They stayed for a few days. So on December 30th, it was kind of wrapping up. I contacted my mom, and she wanted to go to the hospital. And I talked to her a day prior, and she wasn't doing well. And it sounded like she hadn't been doing well for a couple of days. So I went right over, I picked her up, and off we went to the hospital. I saw this as those that were stalking me wanting to prevent me from going to Canada. And it seemed pretty clear, because those that are stalking me also stalked my mother. They're at her home in Waterford. I live in East Lyme, Connecticut, and they've hindered my mother and caused her trouble for many years. And I remember roughly when it started, but it's been quite a few years. So suddenly, I'm supposed to go to Canada. Those that are following me are very scared, and my mom is very sick. So I brought her to the hospital, and I remember on New Year's Day, January 1st, she was not doing well at all. I mean, she was in bed and very uncomfortable. They diagnosed her with pneumonia. Now here's the thing. She's been diagnosed with that before. I don't know about the past, but certainly this time she didn't have a cough other than an irritation in her throat. So it was just a minor cough. She didn't have trouble breathing or wheezing. In the hospital, her oxygen levels were right up to snuff. I saw the results of the x-ray from the radiologist. They said there was some scarring in her lungs, but she gets that type of a report from a chest x-ray when she's feeling just fine. It sounded like it was kind of inconclusive. So I see a doctor, Dr. Fredericks, at Lawrence Memorial Hospital in New London. He comes in, and he comes up to my mom, and he says, "Oh, I understand you have some pneumonia." He takes a stethoscope, puts it on her chest, maybe up near the clavicle, so kind of high in the chest. Listens for not even a second, and he says, "Oh, and it sure sounds like you do." Now, I'm just standing back watching this whole thing, taking it all in. But a doctor who has not seen her yet, and suddenly is now, she's in his care. He walks up, puts a stethoscope on her chest that quickly, and says, "Oh, and it sure sounds like you do," and he walks away. I'm like, I've been examined by a doctor before, and I'm sure many of you have, and when they listen to your breathing, you hold your breath and they listen in a number of places, and then you take a deep breath and they listen in a number of places on your chest, as well as on your back. This doctor listens for about a second and says, "Oh, I guess you do," meaning, "Oh, it sounds real bad." Well, if it sounds that bad, why isn't he doing a complete exam? Why is he just listening so briefly? It just seemed awful strange to me. If it was that bad and he was responsible, it would be negligent of him to not take the time to do a complete exam and understand what her breathing sounded like. I mean, if in that short amount of time she sounded that bad. It just made no sense, and off he goes. It made me wonder if she really had pneumonia. So she gets admitted to the hospital. They take her up, and they said, because there's overflow in the hospital. There's just lots of people in the hospital. We have to put her in maternity. Maternity. Pneumonia. Newborn babies. Now this just strikes me as odd. And so they put her in maternity. And let me just say, I've visited people in this hospital at different times over the years. And it can be hard to park during visiting hours. When you park in the parking garage. And it can be hard to find a place to park. While my mom was in the hospital this time, there was loads of places to park. When I would get there would be plenty of places to park. I parked my truck where there wasn't anyone else. And when I'd come out, there were loads of places to park. How is it that the hospital's overcrowded and my mom has to be in maternity? And why maternity? Okay, so my mom is placed there. And in maternity, most of the people there, well, all of them there, are women giving birth to children. And so they're all pretty healthy people at an age, where they would normally give birth to children. So once the baby's born and the mother is stable, there's no reason to have monitoring 24 hours a day. There's no reason to have heart monitors and breathing monitor that would alarm if something happened in the middle of the night. And so my mom is placed there, where there's no alarm on her. And she's 84 years old and frail, and they say she's got pneumonia. And Dr. Fredericks seemed to indicate that it was really bad because he could detect it by just setting his stethoscope on her chest for a second. And yet she's not being monitored. I coupled all of that with what I have heard in V2K by people who are involved with the hospital. The people who work for NSA contractors. The people who occasionally murder someone in the hospital. And I've heard them discuss how they murder them. They block the blood flow to the carotid arteries. They talk about putting their cursor on both carotid arteries and clicking on them, and the person dies. Within seconds, within 15 seconds or so, they hold it a little longer to make sure they're dead, and they never get up again. And they claim to do that in the hospital. Well, I remember a number of years ago, I had a situation where every time I stood up, I passed out. And it felt like I wasn't getting sufficient blood to my brain, that feeling. And I went and had it evaluated. And the doctor that was evaluating me, he pressed on one carotid artery to constrict it. And there was no change, and he let it go. And then he did the other one, and I went right down. He concluded you don't have blood flow in one carotid artery. Well, he sent me for testing. The testing came out fine. The whole thing resolved. So I don't know what happened. But I do remember that. And it was while I was being stalked with this equipment. Another thing they do to me, and I hear them doing it, they'll do it when I'm driving. They make me feel like I'm going to pass out. And I hear that's what they're doing. They're clicking on the carotid artery, so I start to lose consciousness on the highway. They did it this past fall when I was pulling a trailer. They'll do it when I'm weightlifting. And when they'll do it is when I have the squat bar on my shoulders. And when you're standing there with a squat bar on your shoulders, behind your head, and it's got over 200 pounds on it, if I should stumble, I would fall forward, probably, because the rack's behind me, and it would snap my neck and crush my skull. So they start jabbing me to make me start to pass out, because they want to torment me and make me feel like I'm going to die. Well, I've gotten used to it. I don't die. And that's that. So the whole thing about blocking the blood flow to the carotid arteries and someone dying seems to make sense. At least they've given me some evidence that they can do that. And I felt the effect. And yes, it's like someone putting their hands around your neck and physically restricting the blood flow to your brain. I also have a friend who used to work in the hospital. And he said to me, he said, Jeff, people that die in the hospital, they seem to die at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And they find them dead in the morning. You know, I couple all that with the way my mom was just going downhill, and she looked very, very bad. And her not being monitored around the clock. So maybe they could do something like that. They would do anything to keep from losing me. The FBI are scared. These agents that are involved with me, that follow me. And they're between the NSA and me. Really, most of what's happening here is coming right from the NSA. The FBI are just out there running an interference and kind of being there on the, looking like they're on the front lines. I do understand that the NSA are really the ones involved that do this to us. Okay, so my mom's in the hospital. I'm nervous. She looks like she could die. She was slipping. Lawrence Memorial Hospital is owned by Yale New Haven. I went home and I got on my computer and I wrote a complaint to Yale New Haven. And I accused them of targeting people in the hospital with directed energy equipment for DOD. I told of my mother and what I didn't like the fact that she wasn't being monitored. It was suspicious that she was in maternity. And she wasn't, they weren't getting her to eat any solid food. It just seemed like she was slipping. When I got up that morning, the following morning when I got out of bed, and it was actually morning when I wrote to them, but it was very early in the morning. So when I got out of bed that day, I got a call from Lawrence Memorial Hospital about my complaint, and they assured me that my mom was going to get the best care. I went to the hospital, and as I walked in, the security guard asked me, your name? No, he said, why are you here? Can I help you? Something like that. Because I was just going to walk through like I normally did, like I had before. This time, the guard stopped me. I said, I'm going to see my mom. What's her name? And I told him. He said, okay, go ahead. How is it that the security guard knew her name? I felt like I was trying, like I know these agents are messing around big time. They want to play games. The FBI are professional conspirators. They really are. They really are. From all that they engage in, from narcotics trafficking to extortion, I mean, you name it, they're professional conspirators. I've spoken with them late hours when they're just sitting around this equipment and they want to chat. And they talk too much because this equipment makes them kind of intoxicated. And they just chat away about what they do. So suddenly I'm supposed to feel better, like somehow this hospital is taking better care of my mom, and the security guard knows her name. I mean, this is at the entrance to the hospital. So I thought that was a little odd. But I'm just kind of keeping track of everything that I hear and everything that I see. Let me also mention, when I was up late and I had written to Yale New Haven, I also put in a tip on the FBI website in Washington, D.C. I mean, this is my mom, and I need to do what I can to stop this. And I felt like the problem was coming from without and that she was not really sick. Either way, it seemed like she could die. So I put in the same information to the FBI in Washington, D.C. Well, I heard in V2K, I heard them talking, and they said they couldn't do it anymore because they had people up in Connecticut from D.C. that were taking part in this activity with these agents to attack my mother, and it seemed like for their entertainment. It's part of attacking me. In that last video I talked about priority one, where they need to hurt me. Well, hurting my mom hurts me, and that's really acceptable, and that's a great thing to do. That's the way I believe that they see it. Well, I heard them saying that they couldn't continue with it because people from Washington were around, and they couldn't have my father die. My mother died by their hand. So I get up that morning, and like I said, the hospital call. My mom's going to get the best care. Before I got to see my mother in the hospital that day, in V2K, and if anyone is watching this video who doesn't know what V2K is, it's voice to skull communications. This is high-tech surveillance equipment that produces more than surveillance. It affects the whole central nervous system on demand. And you can carry on two-way communications. So they can talk to me and I can talk to them. It's just another mode of communications, voice to skull, or V2K. In V2K, they told me, your mother's going to be doing better today. So I hear that they can't carry this thing out with killing my mother, not since I've contacted Washington. And they tell me my mom's going to be doing better. I go in, my mother was sitting in a chair and doing better. And they told me that she could probably go home the following day. So like the day before she's on death's door, I make some complaints. I'm assured before I get to the hospital, on the phone, that she's going to get the best care. In V2K, that they're backing off and my mom was going to be doing better. And that they can't go through with killing her in the hospital. I go in. After the security guard seems to know my mother's name off the top of his head, I go in, and she's doing better. And she's sitting in a chair, and they said she could go home the next day. And the next day I brought her home. Okay, so I moved my arrival date to come here to Canada. I had to move it out from the 7th to the 11th. And that's really what the FBI were trying to accomplish. They wanted me to stay home. They didn't think that they could follow me here. And they were scared. And so they're willing to do whatever it takes, including kill my mother. And while my mother was in the hospital and very sick, she said to me, Jeff, if something happens, everything is all streamlined. All of everything, the books, her funeral, everything's all streamlined. It's all set. Have your brother take care of it. He's good at that. And he's honest as the day's long. Let him do the whole thing. The FBI heard that and they thought, you know what? If we kill his mother, he doesn't have to stick around. In fact, he won't have a reason to even be in the area. My mom is what keeps me in the area. I want to be with her. And so there was that also. So I got my mom home, and I was doing my best to help her, to try to nurse her back to health. And they certainly weren't backing off much. They backed it off a bit, but she'd be sitting on the edge of her bed and saying, oh, I feel so sick. I've never been so sick in my life. She's sitting there saying, I feel poisoned. That's not pneumonia. Sitting there on the edge of her bed. She can't eat. Severe diarrhea because they pumped her so full of antibiotics in the hospital. Antibiotics that I don't believe she needed. It was all part of it. It seemed like running her into the ground. So she's sitting there on the edge of the bed saying, I feel so poisoned. I knew it was happening. I know that they can make me feel that way. And worse. Every morning I wake up feeling poisoned. I feel sick. I feel... Take the worst hangover a man could have and multiply it. That's how I feel every morning. I know what that's like. So I moved my trip off till the 11th of January. And I was nursing my mom back to health. And we're at home, at her house. I was staying at her house. On January 10th, suddenly my mom's just goes right back downhill. And we're back in the ER. So I'm supposed to come here on the 11th. And on the 10th, we're back in the ER. And, there again, they're trying to figure out why the diarrhea won't stop. All these things. In V2K, I could hear the people in the hospital talking to others. The people who were following my mom at home, who brought her into the hospital, who didn't bring her in, but followed her in with this electronics. And they turn her over to the hospital people. DOD people. I hear them talking. And I recalled something of the past. When I was running equipment in my vehicle and at home, which would cause their equipment to malfunction, and they would get burned with RF radiation. Those times, and other things I did to really disturb them. And in V2K, I quietly said to the people, I said, do you remember when you were involved with the FBI around my home? And the FBI abused you. They were using you for what they call satanic ritual abuse victims. Satanic ritual abuse victims. See, this whole operation is very satanic, and they recognize it to be that. And I call it a satanic ritual, and so do they. And these people from the hospital, the FBI will abuse anyone. For their entertainment with this equipment. They're having a ball with it. I said, do you remember when they abused you? That's why they don't come around the hospital. The agents aren't in the hospital. There's others here regarding my mom, but not the agents. And they did remember. And I heard them say, that's right. And you're all working together, aren't you? And I heard them say, this is over. This is all over. We're not doing this. We're not cooperating with this. That's what I hear in the background. In my head. In V2K. A few minutes later, the nurse comes in. Now, keep in mind, they took samples, stool samples from my mother. They need to find out what's causing the diarrhea because, they want to figure out what's wrong, or, why she's having diarrhea still and she can't eat and so forth. And they had taken that sample, and the nurse had come in and said, I'm still waiting for that sample to come back. It should come back any time. I had this discussion in my head in V2K. Nurse comes in, says to my mom, you can get dressed now, you're going home. You can get dressed now, you're going home. And they said, this whole thing's probably turning around for you. And what was interesting My mother couldn't eat anything. She hadn't eaten in probably a week or more. Not a stitch of solid food, drinking a lot of Boost and things I was buying for her. She couldn't get food in at all. While she was there in the ER, she had to give a stool sample. She says, well, the only way that can happen is if I try to eat something and it just goes right through me. I've had that done to me, where every time I eat, they give me diarrhea. You know, I've had that done. Anyways, so she has to eat. She goes to eat something. They backed off, and she was so starving, she ate 2 whole sandwiches. Going from not eating anything at all, and she just gobbled down 2 sandwiches. She was starving. They'd backed off on her. The people in the hospital backed it down so she could eat. And she was starving. She ate 2 sandwiches. So I thought that was odd. Never have I been sick where my stomach was disturbed, where I couldn't eat, and maybe for a number of days. When you go back to eating, you eat a little at a time. The stomach shrinks and all. No, she gulped down 2 whole sandwiches. So all this takes place. The nurse comes in. You can go home now. You ate. That was a really good thing. So this thing's turning around for you and all. So home we go again. Now this is on January 10th. So they had driven my mother back into the hospital because the FBI were afraid I was going to be leaving them on the 11th. And they're scared to lose me. It is. It's a real childish kind of fear where they actually freak out and they'll do anything to prevent from losing me. And I believe they're given that fear by the NSA. They're manipulating the FBI just like they attack me. So that's the 10th. I get my mom back home, and I moved my trip out 1 more day. Because my mom was doing somewhat better. She said, I want you to go on that trip. And I didn't want to unless my mom was on her feet enough. You know, where she'd be okay. And I thought that, if I come up here, they'll back off on her and it'll be better for her. I don't think she had anything wrong with her at all. It was all being caused to her. But still very, very dangerous for an 84-year-old woman. And it really, I just can't believe that grown men would be abusive to an 84-year-old woman just to keep me from leaving. But they do. They're violent. They're very violent men. All of them. Very, very violent men. And, they're groomed by the NSA to be violent like that. Through a process. And I've gotten to listen to and watch that process and watch these men degrade over time to the point where it seems like they don't have a conscience. Okay, so that was... I put my trip off till the 12th. And I came here. And today is the yesterday was the 25th. That's the last time I talked to my mom. We talk every day. I'm in Canada and she's in Connecticut, in the town of Waterford. We talk every day. She's struggling. She's going out. She's driven her car and gone to the grocery store. But she gets tired out so quickly she has to go back and rest and sleep. And she wasn't like that before. She wasn't needing to go to sleep all day and all. So it's clear that she's still being followed. And she's still being hindered at home. There's no good reason to do this to my mother. None at all. But they don't want to let her go. They don't want to let her go because that would make me happy that she's doing better. And the FBI and those that are grooming them, they're scared of my happiness. The thought of me being happy just freaks them right out. If I'm walking about in my day and I feel a little light, like I feel a little less of the depression, they immediately turn it right up. I hear them on the other end respond to it, and they turn it right up. And I can feel the pain come right across. I mean, basically, they wake me up in the morning. They wake me up when I wake up, and they make me feel incredibly sick. And some caffeine and all helps me try to put it back together. And I wouldn't be able to budge if they didn't turn it down. And they turn it down, and that's how my day starts. That kind of thing. And they attack me on and off throughout the day with pain and anxiety and all kinds of different things that I don't have. And I mentioned depression. I feel the pain of depression, but I don't have the hopeless thoughts of depression. And usually, it's hopeless thoughts that drive depression. And then, when we have those hopeless thoughts, a pain comes along with them, and it makes us feel hopeless. That the package. But I don't have those thoughts, just the pain. And any other pain they seem to want to cause. So anyway, that's that's what's happened recently with my mom, and I wanted to get that down here. I want them to leave my mother alone. My whole family has been attacked. My wife was driven out of the house in 2012. She's been abused horribly where she is. I believe I got it stopped for her. I'll talk more about that at another time. My children have been abused, 2 of them. And I'm trying to get this stopped. For me, my family, and I have a list of over 30 people that I strongly believe are targeted. And I'm maintaining that list. I've made it available to state and federal government, and I want it stopped for all of them. And I'm not going to rest until it is. And I think that probably makes them want to continue following me because they don't want to lose all of these people. And they know if I'm on the loose without being followed, then I'll track down who's doing it for the others, and I'll make it known to authorities and elsewhere. So that they, that I think that's like a bargaining chip the FBI are probably using with the NSA to, and their contractors. When I say contractors, Sunless Corporation, Electric Boat, and there might be a couple of other small companies I'm not aware of, but General Dynamics Electric Boat has kind of been the coordinator of things in the area I'm in. In fact, I've heard people refer to the area I'm in as Electric Boat's territory. So that's what I have today, and I'm hoping that my mom can get relief from this, and I'm publishing this so that she might. And I want to make the people that are doing this to her nervous, to know that I'm watching it and to know that I'm talking about it, and that they really need to back away from my mom. Okay, till we meet again, thank you, and God bless you.